relief pitchers entering the 2025 baseball season. Well, listen, if you want to win baseball games, especially deep in the postseason, you need a bullpen that you could rely on. And when we did our rankings here, we did our best to rank the top 10 relievers. Doesn't necessarily have to be a pure closer, but who are the top 10 relievers as we enter the 2025 season? Surrounding out our top 10 list at number 10, Johan Duran. All right, and Johan Duran, young player with the Twins, has a lot of potential, had some really good numbers the last few years, but he took a bit of a step back. His ERA last season was over a full run less. He was at 2.45 in the 2023 season, ended up going up again to 3.64. So about a 1.2 increase in ERA between seasons. So a little bit of a dip there. Also had a better year in 2022 when he had a sub-2 ERA. So I think with Johan Duran, again, he dropped 5 points, which is one of our biggest drops you'll see here on these rankings. And if he continues that trend, he's going to be out of the top 10 next year. But we'll see what happens for him. We still have some faith in Johan. So more to come on that. Mason Miller, number 9. Guy came out of nowhere last year and had a phenomenal year for the A's. I mean, you look at his stats, and the guy was an absolute stud. And it's a shame he's not higher on this list. Only pitched 10 games in 2023, 55 though last year. That's really made a name for himself with a 2.49 ERA. I think his numbers went down slightly in the second half, and his first half was absolutely electric. So this is a very nice young arm for an otherwise very bad baseball team. And number 8 on this list, another solid reliever in Andres Munoz. And you look at his numbers. Again, he had a beautiful ERA last year at 2.12. 22 saves, pitched 59.1 innings last year. I think he started the year a little late due to injury, but otherwise very good year for Munoz. Whip sub 1, exactly what you like to see for relievers who are only pitching typically 1 inning anyway. So get that sub 1. That means more times than not, he's going out there on the mound and not even giving up a base runner. What do you guys think?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll talk a little bit about Duran in the number 10 spot, who had a very interesting ride here on our top 10 rankings over the last couple of years. So he went down 5 spots. As we pointed out, he was in the number 5 position last year. 2 years ago, where we started our ESB player rankings, he was in the number 10 spot. So he went from 10 up to 5, back down to 10. Johan Duran, if we are talking about the best entrances for a closer, would probably be in the 1 or 2 position right there with Edwin Diaz. His entrance is electric, but so is he. And even with a 3.64 ERA and a step back for Duran, as his ERA has been climbing a little bit over the last couple of years. ERA plus, fancy stat that I recently got accustomed to. It was at 114. His metrics still very good. He's in the 100 percentile on fastball velocity, and I'm sure a couple of these flamethrowers that we're going to be mentioning on tonight's list are 98 percentile in barrel percentage, 99 in ground ball percentage. So Duran's advanced metrics are really good, despite just having a setback year in 2024.
Guys, listen, we are burying the lead. You all messed up. How is Mason Miller the 9th reliever going into the 2025 season? I had him number 2. He was electric last year. He was absolutely electric, and he's going to take a step forward this year. The stuff is going to be incredible. Now, listen, he's not going to get as many save opportunities as the other teams, as the other closers, because he plays for the A's, and they stink. But you know who doesn't stink? Mason Miller. I can't believe he is this low on the list. I think if we look back on this at the end of the season, 3 of you are going to be looking like clowns, and I, as usual, will be looking like a king.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I like Andres Munoz at 8. Munoz has been fantastic for Seattle. In these last 3 seasons, he has an ERA of 2.49 in 173 innings for Seattle. He's never had a season above a 3 ERA. Saved 22 games last year to a 2.12 ERA and a 0.96 WHIP. That's fantastic. He's just been a model of consistency for Seattle. And if it wasn't for the fact that Seattle can't score runs and he's constantly pitching in tied games or games where Seattle's behind, I mean, he went 9-19 this year, not over the last 3 years. It basically because he's pitching in half the games where Seattle's giving him a tie game, he doesn't get a save opportunity. So if Seattle can actually get some offense and get this guy into save opportunities more regularly, he's going to be fantastic. He's a really, really good pitcher. Is he as elite as some of the flamethrowers at the top of this list? I don't think he's quite that level, but he has just been consistent ever since day one, and that's why I like him.
All right, so let's move on to our next list of three guys who shouldn't be ranked above Mason Miller. So we'll start with number 7, Tanner Scott, who has recently signed with the Dodgers because, of course, he did. A very good year last year under a 2 ERA. His WHIP was just over 1, but still striking out 84 guys in 72 innings, more than a strikeout an inning. Putting up a 4 WAR season as a closer is pretty difficult. He was able to do that last year. Very solid pitcher. We think he's someone who's going to, as a lefty, going to excel. Might be one of the better lefties in all of baseball coming out of the pen. We got number 5. That's the number I'm on. 6. 6. We have Raisel Iglesias of the Atlanta Braves, Joe's favorite team. Iglesias, another guy, sub 2 ERA, which you want to see. And if we want to talk about low whips, a .736 whip. So he is really doing the thing, not striking out as many guys, actually just under a strikeout an inning. But he's getting the job done. And the Braves as a team who last year disappointed mostly because of all the injuries they had. He's someone that I think could really bounce back and be a lot more valuable as the Braves would most likely kind of bounce back and have a better year this year. And then finally, we have Josh Hader in the 5 spot. Frankly, kind of on name recognition alone, because he was pretty stinky last year. A 3.8 ERA, still striking out a bunch of guys. 105 strikeouts in 71 innings. He did have just under a 1 whip, but really allowing way too many runs. And as a closer, that's something you don't want to do because that's probably going to lose your team the game. Definitely one of his worst seasons if you look at it for like a full season that he's had in his career. Now has a track record of being one of the best closers in baseball, and he most likely will bounce back and maybe kind of earn himself into that top 3 spot. But for right now, we have him in 5. And what do you guys think about those guys?
Yeah, I think you touch base on Hader. Yeah, it's certainly a down year, a 3.8 ERA after the year before he had a 1.28 ERA. He still saved 34 games. He struck out 105 guys. That is a phenomenal. That is 13.3 strikeouts per 9. He had a below 1 whip. So a little bad luck here. He gave up 12 home runs last year in 71 innings. That's way up. The year before he gave up 3. So if he could figure out a way to keep the ball in the ballpark, he's still an elite closer. He's a guy that I would want on the mound myself if my life was on the line. He's just got incredibly nasty stuff. It's just unfortunately he had a little bit of a snake-bitten year, it seemed, last year by giving up the long ball.
And, Tanner Scott, too, making this list. This is the hottest reliever on the free agency market this year. A lot of teams were interested in him. Both New York teams would love to bring him on board. But the dude got paid 4 years, $72 million, with who else? The LA Dodgers, of course. But a phenomenal lefty reliever. And, whether you're putting out there versus lefties, putting him in there to get a hold, put him in there to get a save, the guy's a very reliable left-handed reliever out there, and that's why he got paid. Maybe you could make the case he got a little overpaid, but that's the case of baseball this year. If you put up the numbers, more likely than not, you're going to get paid, at least in the short ABVs. So Tanner Scott, congrats on your contract.
Raisel Iglesias, 2 years ago on our first set of rankings, ranked number 8. Last year, he ranked number 7. This year, he ranked number 6. So, Rafael Iglesias, if you keep up the great work, in about 5 years' time, you'll be number 1 on our ESB list because that's the pace Rafael is making. But I think Iglesias is getting a little disrespect. And I know there's a couple Met fans here on our here in our round table. But Iglesias, since he's been with the Braves, 1.96 as their as a primary back end reliever to the closer's role. He's saved 33 and 34 games over the last 2 seasons. He's going to be back in that spot for Atlanta. Atlanta's got that great offense again. Hopefully, as long as they stay healthy, Iglesias is going to be set up for another year of potentially 30 plus saves. I think Iglesias deserves a higher spot. In most closer lists, he sits at number 6. I could probably make an argument though that Iglesias should be down to the number 3 or 4 spot, but the closers on this list are very good. Tanner Scott making his debut here on this list. Hader scaled down again after getting all the way up back to 2. So just talk about some of the dominance in the closers role this year, and Iglesias is in the 6th spot. So we'll move on from our 7 through 5, and we get down to the number 4 through 2 spot. And with that is Corey Favs. Joe, my apologies. Go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
All right. So we have here at number 4, Ryan Helsley of the St. Louis Cardinals. And Helsley last year had a phenomenal season, led the league in saves with 49 saves, a 2.04 ERA, 79 strikeouts, a 1.1 whip. He was fantastic. Actually earned himself a top 10 finish in the Cy Young voting at number 9. And furthermore, since he became the primary closer, now that Giovanni Gallegos is out of there and all that, he's been fantastic for the Cardinals. Last 3 years, he has a 2.18 ERA with 63 saves over the last 3 seasons for the Cardinals. An elite pitcher, consistent, and overall fantastic. He earns the number 4 spot. Sound the trumpets. Number 3 is Edwin Diaz. Edwin Diaz, coming off of the Achilles tear, had kind of an up and down season for the Mets. He had initially got off to a hot start in the first few games and then kind of lost it a little bit there in the month of May. Overall, he saved 20 games, had 3.52 ERA in 53 innings, but his strikeouts per 9 was still elite, 14.1, a 1.043 whip. And did see some action in the postseason overall. So, listen, Edwin, it's about the injury, coming off the injury, being another year removed. That's why I think he's going to be higher on this list this year going into next season. Number 2 is Devin Williams, the Yankees' new acquisition from the Milwaukee Brewers. Williams had an abbreviated season last year due to a stress fracture in his back that it took him a long time to recover. Came back for the second half of the season, a 1.25 ERA, 14 saves in 21 innings, a 0.96 whip, and a 15.8 strikeouts per 9. Over the course of his career, he has a 1.83 ERA. The only blemish on Williams' record last year was the fact that he gave up a home run to Pete Alonso in Game 3 of the Wild Card Series. But other than that, he has been fantastic. They call him the Airbender with that wicked change, and he earns the number 2 spot on this list.
Yeah, and just to touch on Edwin Diaz a little bit here too, I did have him on my list as well as the number 3 reliever, and it really was the tale of 2 seasons because in the first 2 months of the season, he was not good. He went on the IL, then he had the suspension, but then once he came back, was definitely more reliable. And look in the playoffs, in the NLCS versus the Dodgers, pitched almost 6 innings, no runs. You saw him going out there getting multiple inning outings at times. And a big thing with him, he came off of a big ACL injury the year prior. And, as a power pitcher, you need to be able to put power on that leg. So I think from Edwin's standpoint, he definitely was not himself in the first half of the season. But certainly in the second half, he looked a lot more like his older self. And I put him over 3 because I just think even though like Ryan Helsley, for instance, better numbers, I think Diaz is going to be a lot closer to his career norms going into 2025.
I'll touch on the Yankees' newest toy in the bullpen, Devin Williams. Big news as of recording this today on the 11th. Showed up to Yankees camp with a beard, not too dissimilar to mine. So we're gonna see if he's gonna try to test those facial hair waters with the Yankees, but certainly deserves this number 2 spot. Joe mentioned it with the airbender changeup, which is one of those very unique pitches in baseball. Obviously someone who throws hard as a reliever, but he's not an absolute pure flamethrower, which I think kind of makes him a little different than some of the guys on this list, which I also think helps project him into the future, because he's not going to be just so reliant on being able to throw 102. Not that he throws soft. He's not Greg Maddux up there, but he does, he's not relying completely on that fastball. He's coming out of Milwaukee, stepping into the spotlight. Last year on his deal, I know there were some talks with the Yankees trying to extend him. I'm sure that might continue into the season, as he could be the heir apparent to really the role that has, Chapman was the last one who really locked it down for a long time for the Yankees. And let's see if Devin Williams can do that as well.
And I'll talk about Ryan Helsley, because I think Mr. Helsley here was wronged by my fellow co-host. Ladies and gentlemen, I had Ryan Helsley all the way up in the 2 spot when I submitted these rankings not too long ago. And Ryan Helsley, deservingly so. I mean, he is the reigning NL reliever of the year. Helsley is coming off a season where he had a 2.04 ERA, led the league with 49 saves. He had a 2.45 in 2023, a 1.25 in 2022. He stayed healthy. I don't know. I think Helsley got a little bit of disrespect being in the 4 spot, where I had him ranked over the 2 New York closers in this instance. But Helsley is in our 4 spot. So I can't argue with our version of the shredder. It is what it is. So Helsley is at number 4. But does number 4 really matter when you're not number 1 at the end of the day? Joe, does it matter? I don't think
I don't think so.
It kind of does matter. I mean,
makes for interesting conversation, which I'm sure we're gonna get.
Sure.
Well, number 1, and I'm curious if this number 1 was unanimous across the board. We'll ask in a little bit. But our number 1 closer is the Cleveland Guardians, Emmanuel Clase. And Emmanuel Clase actually improved 3 spots from last year. He was in our number 4 spot in 2024. 2 years ago, he was all the way up to number 2. So he is now in the number 1 spot for the first time here on our rankings board. And for Emmanuel Clase, again, the numbers, unfreaking believable in 2024. A .61 ERA, 47 saves, led the American League there. Led the American League also in games finished with 66. And unfortunately for Emmanuel Clase, the postseason rankings, I think, would have been a little bit different. Clase did not show out at all for the playoffs after having such a dominant regular season. But Clase fits in our number 1 spot. So I got to ask the fellas here now, did you guys all have Clase in your number 1, or did you have a different number 1?
We did.
I submitted him. I submitted him with an asterisk that if he's not playing the Yankees, he is number 1. If he is playing the Yankees, he's hot doo-doo. Was my note.
Listen, he's number 1. He led the league in saves the last 3 seasons. He led the league in games finished the last 3 seasons.
Led the league in getting dog walked by Aaron Judge as well.
Well, I mean, the new Yankee closer had similar issues in the playoffs. So, listen, what we find out about closers, no one is Mariano Rivera in the playoffs. That's just the facts. It doesn't matter any of these closers. It's a problem in the big game. But, when you have a .61 ERA and you gave up 5 earned runs all season, I mean, what else can you say? You got to be number 1. He's unique because he doesn't actually strike out a ton of guys. He only struck out 66 guys in 74 innings last year. And most people think he's like this great flamethrower. He really isn't. So he's very unique. But right now he's the best closer in baseball.
Yeah, I mean, he was our universal number one for a reason. I mean, the numbers last year in the regular season, absolutely absurd how good they were. Now, the postseason, completely different story, but it's not like he has a track record of being bad in the postseason, because when the Guardians were in the playoffs back in 2022, he did have 6 scoreless innings in their brief run. So let's see what happens this year. Let's see if they even make the playoffs, but will be very interesting to see, should they make the playoffs, which performance do we get? Do we get last year's, or do we get closer to 2022 where he was lights out in the playoffs? But only time will tell.
Yep, only time will tell. Well, Emmanuel Clase pops in at our number 1 spot, and there you have our top 10 list once again. Duran, Miller, Munoz, Scott, Iglesias, Hader, Helsley, Diaz, Williams, Clase. Corey Favs, send us home.
Yeah. All right. Listen, thank you all for coming in here today, joining us, and looking at our top 10 relievers. But it's time for us to close this out as well. So more to come, a lot more top 10 lists on the way.